Hi everyone, welcome to Mindset Adventure. I'm Tini and I'm here with Nolan, who is the founder of the Just Keep Learning project. And I'm going to let him tell you all about that. It's all about growth mindset, how to embrace it, how to nourish it, and how to never stop learning. Did I get that right?
It's perfect. I think the neat thing about the project itself is that it's really grown using that same value of continuous learning. It started as a tiny blog that I used to write on about once a year because I didn't understand how to build systems or habits, or I was scared to publish my writing, and I would upload one blog post a year for about 6 years. So it's so funny to see it grow from that. And then in just the last year, I've really understood how to build it up more quickly, and it's become much more than a blog. It's kind of like an entire movement, which is pretty exciting.
How did you get started with this? I mean, you said that you were posting once a year. What made you decide to stop posting so rarely, I think?
Yeah, so with the part of posting once a year, it was just not having a willingness to be vulnerable enough to put my work out there, and not understanding how blogs work in terms of the internet side of things and being searchable, but mostly because I was doing it as a hobby and a passion project. I wasn't worried about SEO or Google traffic or anything like that. It was just, I know that I have good stories and lessons to share that can help people, and I want to put them out there into the world. So I didn't have the pressure of I should post, this number of times a week or whatever. It was just like whenever I have something written, I'll post it. But I had tons written in a Google Doc that was just in my folders without ever publishing. And it was kind of one of those things that I hear a lot of people say, I'll do it tomorrow, right? People will say, whether it's fitness or it's writing or it's playing basketball, they'll say, I'm going to do it tomorrow. Or they always pick Monday. Monday's a common time. Monday, I'm going to start. So I was in that cycle for 5 years of, I need to do another blog post. I'll do it tomorrow. And that typically is not necessarily just procrastination. It's fear, right? Because you're worried about what people will think. And so I was involved in that cycle of fear and pushing things off. And then how I decided to start it is actually a pretty interesting story. The reason behind Just Keep Learning, the JKL concept, was that I was in leadership positions in schools as a vice principal. And I would constantly have people asking me about relationships with colleagues that they were struggling in. And I would write on the board that if you JKL, that's all you need to remember when you're having these interactions with people is stay continually learning. So they can't get under your skin and they can't make you angry and they can't ultimately be mean to you if you're fascinated with their psychology and why they're struggling and why they're kind of acting that way. And also, you don't have to take all of the feedback, but you can continually learn by taking some of it and moving on. And so it was actually all about putting people's stance in a learning mindset that led to it being tied to goal setting too, right? I realized that so many people struggle with goals because they're looking at the results, when what you should do is go to bed, wake up, and with whatever time you have towards your goal, just continue to learn about it and put the work in. So that's kind of how it started.
Do you find that sometimes we postpone or procrastinate on working on our goals because they're not the right goals for us?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons that people do put things off or struggle with them. Uh, it's the way that I like to describe it is, in life we have 5 things that we have the time to focus the majority, 99% of our energy on. And that actually comes from the great investor Warren Buffett. He tells people to do an exercise where you take your top 25 things you want to do in life, and then you continually do process of elimination to get it down to 5. You only have time to focus on 5 things at any given moment. So we all have the same 24 hours in a day. And I try and remind people that the concept of time management is a bit of a myth, because you can't stop the clock. What you can manage is what you're doing, right? So it's more about priority management. And back to your original question, if we have 5 things we can do, I like to tell people that the first one should be self-care. So that could be nutrition, fitness, sleep, all the things that are involved in taking care of yourself, meditation, what have you. Then the second thing is family. The third is friends and colleagues. So if you're already having those 3 things take up a lot of your energy, you have 2 things left. And so what I know is that everybody has a passion, a true passion, deepest in their heart. It can change, but at any given moment, there's only one. And that passion should fit in that 4th or 5th thing. The 4th thing is your job. If you don't have disposable money, then you need to pay your bills. The 5th thing is your passion project. What's really cool, and it almost takes a diagram to show, but sometimes 4 and 5 can be the same things. If you love singing, for example, my daughter was dancing around the kitchen to Amy Winehouse this morning. That's an example of someone who obviously her passion is singing, and that's how she had made her money. So 4 and 5 gets a little complicated, but the number one passion should exist, whether it's in your job or a hobby.
Okay, 4 is your job, and then 5 can be a hobby if 4 and 5 don't merge. Like passion
Exactly,
and job.
and so I can build that out a little bit more. I love explaining to people how, with source energy, we need to live in the present, right? But we can have future goals, and these things. One of the analogies, one of the stories I tell to use this is that those first 3 things are like glass balls, right? Like dishes. If you drop them, they'll break. And that can have very detrimental, long-lasting things, right? We see it when people lose their children who never talk to them again, or or they get sick, they get burned out. So you never want to mess with those first 3. But with 4 and 5, it's so interchangeable if we're willing to live in the present moment and focus on what we enjoy in the current moment. Our hobbies, our jobs, our careers, our vocations can evolve and change. So what I like to explain is that there's kind of 4 boxes that these things could go into. One is hobby, and that's, the obvious, right? You're just doing it because you purely enjoy it. And for me, a good example is fitness. I used to be a personal trainer, making $10,000 months as a personal trainer. It's a business that some people say that I was stupid to get out of because I was good at it. But to me, I just always felt that working out was hobby based. So for the pure enjoyment. Then you have job, and straightforward, that's to pay your bills. It's money in because I need to pay the bills. That's it. I need to keep the lights on. I need to keep food on the table. So you might even not really enjoy it, but it's a means to an end. And then career being something that I'm in right now too, because I have that long-term teaching career that, salary based, extends over years. And then on the more philosophical level, a vocation, right? The vocation for me is teaching. So whether I'm teaching right now on this episode of yours, or I'm teaching on my blog, or I'm teaching to a high school classroom, or I go into a jail and sit one-on-one with a kid who wants to learn how to start a business, that what's amazing for me is that will last my whole life. So um, 4 and 5, back to the original question, would be one of those things in each box.
Yeah, and you can use the vocation that you have in any field that you might be in, something related to your passion, for instance, and what you're doing right now with the growth mindset as well, because you're teaching people as well. Only that.
Well, for sure, yeah. And I say teaching because I think it's a more common, transferable, understood word. What if I went to a more a deeper level? Like, it's for me, that vocation is just helping people follow their dreams, and that is so misunderstood. It just fascinates me how misunderstood that is, and I see youth and adults really shove their emotions and their passions deep down, just for so many reasons. Um, but regardless of the reasons, they put those dreams aside for so long that they live with regret. And when I see that happen so many times, and it has a trickle down effect, right? When people aren't in alignment with what they want to do, it impacts them, it impacts everyone around them, and they go on and sadly, you see people get to the end of their life where they really um, have some regrets. And so that's the vocation for me, is teaching people how to uh, get themselves in the mindset where they don't have to live with regret in the future.
But why do you think it's so misunderstood? Is it because of the patterns that go from generation to generation, or thinking that someone cannot do what they'd like to do, what they're passionate about, because they won't be making money, for instance, or to be struggling?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is cultural, is societal, right? When I think of the idea of college and university, which as a concept I would never be against, but the point is, does it actually map towards the ambitions that person has? I think it's easy to argue that a lot of times it doesn't. But the leaders in people's lives, teachers or guidance counselors, or maybe family members, um, there's still that generation, as you mentioned, where they don't really know how to help them do the things that seem way more random, right? To be a gamer on Twitch in today's day and age, for example, as a career, is very possible. But there's no college program that tells you that once you're done it, here's your job as a gamer. And what is really interesting and scary is that even if you go to college for psychology, or you go for something like education or biology, there's also not really a piece of paper anymore that says, here's your job now. And so I think that is a big part of it. Is it's still a generation over generation tradition, where the last group of parents, the most recent group of parents and grandparents, it still did work for the far majority. So it makes sense for them to appreciate that on average, going to college, university is going to help you. And that may be a very big truth again in the future, so long as college and universities evolve from what the style and what they're doing now, right? Like, I mean, imagine a college was teaching how to create online courses and run Facebook ads to build a business. Imagine they were doing that 3 years ago. I mean, I would be telling every kid I ever taught to go sign up for that program. And so I think they will evolve if they are to survive. Um, I think the other thing is just not knowing how to evaluate what people's passions are is one of the biggest things that gets in the way. And so if I'm sitting down to talk to somebody about their interests, sometimes that will happen over the course of days, ultimately, till we realize, yeah, it really is photography that you just absolutely love. Sometimes it happens the first time I meet them, but it's still an hour-long conversation of mind mapping and putting ideas down and going back into your history and these things. I do a lot of work with youth with a lot of trauma, and I think that there are so many aspects of pain that get in the way, right? Because that pain ultimately, kitten visitor, that pain ultimately gets in the way of building confidence and even being able to start the conversation of self-discovery is so difficult because they're so broken in terms of their ability to believe that something's possible. And so I think it's all of that coming together that makes it very confusing for people to try and follow their dreams.
Yeah. I was just thinking about a few episodes just recently. I was thinking about me and my writing, for instance, and how I received a comment from a teacher that my writing wasn't as good. I don't know, as according to her standards, I think. But it was so long ago that I now see that maybe she wasn't used to having people who could do that type of thing, and she would just focus on what she had to do on the curriculum, I think.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of those biggest things. I appreciate that we're doing, a 30-minute, hour-long episode right now, but it's one of these things that are ongoing dialogues. We could talk forever about teasing out and figuring out what those things are. And also they're very individual, right? So if we're trying to make general statements, it gets difficult, but that's a perfect example of an individual thing that could ruin your passion for writing for the rest of your life. It could. It also can be turned into motivation for it, right? If it's channeled, the energy is the same. If we can channel it in a direction that's helpful, and that's going to be pretty neat. And that's when you see people who become like musicians or authors, going back to their high schools or putting in their lyrics or their poetry, doing a piece about how everyone told me I couldn't do it, or these things. And you hear interviews with a musician or a writer who are like, yeah, everyone told me that I couldn't write, and it just motivated me more. I would never want somebody to choose a passion project purely out of spite, but if you love it and people are doubting you, I mean, that's just if you have the right support system, it's an amazing combination for a lot of success, because you're not going to get too tired doing it. You're just gonna keep working.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, that you can use those comments and everything to keep learning and to see everything with curiosity and don't judge what the other person says, but do your thing.
Of course. And back to your question about, or I think you made a comment about how perhaps she was just focused on the curriculum and what she felt was right. I mean, I have so many stories that I've seen of that kind of stuff. There's one right now ringing very true when it comes to attendance in high schools, right? I've been on podcasts, or just being in colleagues in an office with a principal or somebody planning for schools, and we get talking about attendance. And attendance is something that fascinates me because it does not map to success in school necessarily, right? Obviously, the more you're around people, the more likely you are to succeed. But I was somebody who struggled with that because as a youth myself, I had sleep problems and I had anxiety. And I also had a very, very small tolerance for busy work. Like if I went to class and my teacher was tired the night before, didn't prepare anything, and then gives us a worksheet, like I just, as a teenager, I wanted to smash a window. Like it would just make me so mad. So I'd be like, well, why am I here? And that translated into university. I never went to class, but everything that's on the exam was in a textbook. So I didn't need to go to class. Right. And then I go to the exam and everyone who went to class would be pissed because I get a 90%. And so I just fell into that boat of of, well, this is what they're asking us to learn. It's content and knowledge based. The content and knowledge is right here. If I go waste 3 hours sitting in class listening to somebody, it doesn't help. I just learn it in half the time or less. And so I just think that there are so many examples. When Wikipedia, when the internet first started being used to help people write papers and to write research and write blogs, there was a huge culture of, it's not true resources, right? Because you can't reference them, and there's no credibility. And I would say, yeah, but eventually it's going to grow to where there is better references, better websites, better credibility. We're not going back to having to rent a thesaurus or books necessarily in the library to learn this information, right? And so anyhow, I think a lot of those things are deep rooted in what the other person learned. And I think it is important to realize that that she probably didn't mean harm. Sadly, sometimes they do too. They're jealous. They don't want to see other people go chase their dreams.
Yeah, it's true. There's no way of telling unless they tell us that that's the case. So why bother thinking about that?
Well, what's fascinating, and not to dig too deep with the philosophy, but a lot of times they probably don't even know, right? If they're being those dream blockers. One of the people that I look up to most in this world of online business, and I've read, I figured one of his would be up here, Icarus Deception by Seth Godin. I have a number of his books. And for the concept of growth mindset and continually learning, there's no one better with examples in writing of that. And I think one of those things that he talks about is just focusing on your own work. And his classic term is just ship it. Like, you don't need to overanalyze. If it's writing, write and ship it, write and ship it. You can take feedback, but you also don't have to, because things can be done for the creativity, and the disruption and innovation is so much more important than maintaining the status quo. If you're going to stand out, if you're going to be unique, if you're going to have impact on an intimate group of people that actually has their lives changed, you're not going to be doing what that standardized curriculum says, right? And so in his books, it's very common for him to just like purposefully put a bunch of indents or skip a couple lines, or on one page, all of a sudden there's only one sentence, just to do little things to be like, look, you don't have to follow the formula, mix it up, go with your gut, and all those sorts of things. You had asked about barriers to continually learning, and I didn't mention that one of the most important things is that people who struggle with chasing their dreams so often have a fixed mindset. They're stuck in this idea that and they grew up in their parents telling them, or their teachers telling them, that either you are good at music or you are bad at music. People have made things very binary over the years, and we don't live in that world certainly anymore. When there was access to instruments that other people didn't have access to in the music world, perhaps, then you could argue that it was harder. But in the world we're in today, there's no A or B, yes or no, I'm good or I'm bad. There's just this, not even like a linear continuum. It's like this constellation. It's like looking at the sky of stars, of possibilities when it comes to learning something. And the youth I've worked with over the years, or I'm starting to realize it's just people in general, don't understand that on even a surface level, let alone a deep level, right? If I ask somebody, oh, what do you want to do? What do you think you want to do? They'll say, oh, I love voice acting. I'd love to be the voices in Disney movies, and I'd love to do commercials. And I say, okay, well, let's do that. I'm like, no, my voice sounds weird. Like, they go right away to the barriers and the challenges. And music, I don't know why, but music always comes back for me in terms of skill building, because I think something like singing, if I just start singing for you right now, which I'll spare you that, it's going to sound terrible. But I know that if I hire a coach, that if I do a lot of research, and if every day I practice singing, that in, a couple hundred hours from now, it's going to sound good enough that I could make some music. And so that's just the fact, is that that's how our brains work. There's no predicting that you're going to be good or bad. It's just continual growth is a fact, but we don't see it. The majority of people don't see it as a fact. They see their facts and what they believe as I'm either good or bad.
Yeah, it's so important. And I can relate with the singing. Not good. But
Did you try?
I tried, but I didn't practice every day. I did not get a teacher. So
Well, it's a fascinating thing. And that, a lot of the things that I've created over the years were confusing for me because I knew that I wanted the story to be told in little examples, like my handle on social media, for example. I like my name, but I changed it to Just Tries. I've changed it over the years to many things, but I think I finally found the one that I like because it tells the story in one or two words, depending on how you look at it, that's the only thing we can do, right? If you go to a concert and you're looking at that musician on stage and you just love, watching Justin Timberlake strut across the stage and sing, and you're like, that'd be so cool. It's like the doing it, if you're actually passionate about it, is what will create that vitality and create that meaning that's going to make your life happier. I don't like saying happy because happiness and sadness are two sides of an equal coin, and both important. I see a lot of thought leaders talk about how to be happy. I think that's a mistake. I prefer vitality and meaning because, for example, a friend of mine passed this week. It's a very sad thing, and I'm willing to allow myself to be sad in these moments. And when we go to her celebration of life and the tribute next weekend, I'll be very sad, and I'm excited. I'm looking forward to being sad because that's an important emotion that we all feel. So I have no interest in mapping towards happiness, but you will have more happiness and joy in the moments that you're not sad, and you'll fully feel them if you're pursuing vitality and meaning. So it gets a little bit kind of deep and confusing for people when you're not helping them, day after day or week over week. But I think that's just an important thing to point out, is if you're pursuing your passion, whether it's a hobby or a job, it's going to give you more of that vitality. You'll enjoy the happy moments and the joyful moments more often and deeper.
I agree with you 100%. But what would you tell someone who's perhaps attracted to different things and is not sure what to pick?
Yeah, and that is extremely common, right? I think the first step, and what I've been posting on a lot on social the last 24 hours, is just how to dream, right? So go for a walk. And before you go for a walk, set your intention that you're going to think, I have $200 million coming into my bank tomorrow morning. What do I want my life to look like? So I have these little prompts, right? If I pick the 5 coolest jobs in the world, what is one that I think I would pick to start tomorrow if I could? Go for a walk and just think like that. If you get into this stage where you can create those previews and those potential coming attractions and those dreams for yourself, you can start believing in the possibility of some of those dreams. Then step 2 is, as you said, getting to the point where, how do I pick one? And I think the most important thing, and it's very difficult, but the science behind it is pretty clear, is that you have to pick one. And so the only thing you can do is, and I love telling people to have a conversation with somebody else about this. There's a classic Seinfeld episode in the States from a while back where one of the characters is sitting there brainstorming things he wants to do, and his friend, they're going back and forth with the dialogue, right? And we see that all the time in life when people are stuck. To get unstuck, they go have that conversation. Well, maybe I can do this, maybe I can do that. And, people will give the dialogue back. Yeah, but, um, if it's singing, then you have to just start going. But I'm talking about if you don't know, then somebody that you trust, somebody that is going to look out for you and help you. This is one of my favorite conversations to have with people, so people can reach out to me. It's having somebody outside of yourself to have those difficult conversations with. But by the end of that conversation, or by the end of that couple days, you have to pick whatever your gut tells you is the number one thing, and then stick with it, at least for a little bit, because there's a very uncomfortable learning period for all of these things. The idea of playing golf comes to mind. It's going to be very difficult at first. You're going to feel embarrassed. You're going to need to be vulnerable and brave to stick it out, because you're going to be so bad that if you're tying it to success, you're going to give up. Snowboarding and skiing is another big one because it's physically painful, right? You've always wanted to be a winter person. Do you have a story?
A snowboard, I picked it up just at the beginning of this year, so I know what you mean.
And how did it go?
Well, it went well. I fell a few times, then I got scared. I didn't want to do it anymore, but then I jumped on it again. And yeah, by the end, I felt confident. Winter was gone, so yay.
So now you get a break.
Yeah.
And will you do it again next year?
Yep.
And you don't have to. And that's getting to the next point, right? Is that the act of learning and focusing on something for a given period of time is the transferable mindset and skill that we're after. And that goes back to the idea of source energy, because I don't care what it is that somebody's learning. It's the act of learning itself that has all of the positive byproducts. And so people will say to me, for example, in the online business world, that what I do isn't niche enough. And that fascinates me because I think it's as niche as you can get, because it's getting very, very specific to what every one person needs. I know what they're saying. They're saying, yeah, but if you coach people, you need to coach people in guitar or, driver's ed, how to drive a car. And I'm like, yeah, but it's the part that is way more important is that it's the act of being able to learn itself, because those things can change and they can change quickly. And so just to circle back to that, what you need to do is just try the thing, and you give it enough of a try that you start to learn it, you start to do okay. And then if you still love it, you just keep going, you push through. At those points, you can only really go with your gut and realize if you want to try something else. I think that's where people who succeed eventually, when they have a lot of competing interests, is because they are willing to just get out ahead of it and try. And that will allow you to realize you'll have a different feeling when you hit on that one that you really love. The crazy thing about it on again, just that philosophical level, is depending on it, like it may be the self-discovery, the confidence, and the learning strategies that you develop by trying the first couple things. Like, let's say you try painting and you give up, and then you try guitar and you give up, and you get into poetry, and like on Instagram, the stuff you're posting people love, and you're asked to come speak to a high school group about writing poetry, and you just take off and you start to love it. What's so fascinating to me is that had you chose poetry first, you might have given up on that, and then painting you might have burned, but guitar might have been third. But because you developed so much ability to learn and so much ability to develop a growth mindset by sacrificing those first two learning opportunities, all of a sudden you're getting asked to go play at a coffee shop with your guitar. And when you go around a barbecue, a bonfire with your family, you're playing guitar. all of a sudden that becomes the thing. And I think that it's just going back to that idea that it's important to surround yourself with supportive people, to learn about growth mindset, to learn about learning while you try something and give it a fair go. I'll just add too that that's kind of my overall pillar content. So what I do working with youth or what I do coaching on the internet is very specific to the individual and specific to learning, like we've just been talking about, right? How to go through the steps to find your passion and follow it without feeling overwhelmed. But my actual content on YouTube or my blog is sharing examples of that. And I want to give it a fair amount of time. So I do it for 200 hours, right? So some of the paintings that I have around here were because I was going to start doing painting for 200 hours. I had some really cool guests lined up and that kind of thing. Filmmaking was another example, but all of these fun things kind of fell through because of COVID. And so what I moved to was the idea of learning online business for 200 hours and just sharing what I learned, just showing people how to learn. And for me, if I can do that the rest of my life and just cycle those learning opportunities to show people, here's how you learn golf for 200 hours, here's how you learn fitness. I think that modeling for people will go a really long way and will be helpful because you get better at it each time. So I'm excited to get back to those things when it comes to YouTube and podcast.
Yes, and it just gives us something tangible to look out for, like 200 hours. At least you know what you're looking for instead of, oh, I gave it a try for 1 day, 2 days, and that was it.
Yeah, and I get that question a lot. How'd you come up with 200 hours? And so the one thing that I reference is Malcolm Gladwell's work, right? When we think of outliers and we think of the idea of experts having to put in 10,000 hours, I know that Billie Eilish, for example, her brother put 10,000 hours above their bedroom door so that they knew that they were going to grind it out. They were going to battle and they were going to work for 10,000 hours on their music because they knew that that would be this place where they get to become experts and the best in the world. And that quickly translates down the line though to people who haven't read the book or to people who don't understand the overall concept. And it becomes a barrier because they think, oh my God, like I need to put 10,000 hours into getting good at golf. Like, nope, not happening. And so I think people give up very quickly. Again, they don't appreciate that in a very small amount of time, you can start to enjoy the activity, which is the ultimate goal. I feel that 100 hours goes quickly for the people who have a lot of time to commit to it. If you can commit, 30 hours a week because you don't have a day job taking up too much time, or you don't have kids, maybe you're only, 16 years old and it's summer, then that can go very chronologically quick. And I also didn't think that going beyond 200 would be necessary. So I personally liked 200, even with a full-time job and kids. It's a few months, of giving it a fair go to try singing.
Yeah, and you see how it fits into your life and everything. So thank you for that. So where can people find you if they want to connect with you more?
So online across all social media platforms, I have the handle at JustTries. If you go through our website, JustKeepLearning.ca, which is essentially the coaching and courses, educators and students, and I think people will really take to that portion of the internet. As that grows out, it'll be that more formal learning space. You can email us through there. And then I have the personal blog, which is justtries.ca. And that's where I do daily writing. We've recorded for a while here and talked about a number of topics. Any one of those topics I would publish as daily writing, just to try and give those little daily tips about how to keep learning.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. And any parting words? for everyone listening, watching?
I would just like to say that the most important thing with all of this is having perspective. One of the stories, if I'm doing public speaking or something, that I talk a lot about is growing up in a funeral home. And I think with coronavirus right now, we can see how serious and difficult the world can be for many people. So when we're talking about the idea of getting in a mindset to learn a fun skill or follow our passions, if we're fortunate enough to do that in and of itself, and we focus on gratitude, then all this becomes all that much more easy. It becomes something that we really don't have to overthink, because whether it's painting or singing or writing, it doesn't really matter. It's like, just do it, just try it, and see what happens.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And everyone watching, thank you for watching us, for listening. And until next time, I'm sending you all a big hug. Take care. Bye.